All right, let's dive into a massive challenge for any business operating on the global stage. How in the world do you make accurate financial predictions in the fast moving, often chaotic world of emerging markets? I mean, these places are just bursting with opportunity, right? They're total engines of growth. But they also come with some really unique financial hurdles. And if you get your projections wrong here, well, the consequences can be pretty huge. So that's the big question, isn't it? Why do so many forecasts in these markets seem to miss the mark so badly? It can feel like you're trying to hit a moving target in the pitch dark. Let's pull back the curtain and see what makes these projections so incredibly tricky. Well, when you boil it all down, it really comes down to two main culprits that just love to throw a wrench in the works: unstable, weak local currencies and the constant, nagging pressure of chronic inflation. These two often team up to create a perfect storm of business uncertainty. So a weak currency just means its value is all over the place. You just can't rely on it day to day. And inflation, as you know, is that steady rise in prices that just eats away at the value of every dollar or peso or real you earn. When you're dealing with both at the same time, trying to plan for next year becomes a real nightmare. Now, to fight this, analysts usually try two things. They either build inflation right into their forecasts in the local currency, or they just translate everything into a more stable, hard currency, like the US dollar. Both are useful, for sure, but today we're going to zero in on that first one, because really, truly understanding how to handle inflation, that's the absolute key to getting it right. And here's why it gets tricky. It's not as simple as just slapping a single percentage on top of all your numbers. In fact, that common approach of using just one inflation number, well, it's totally flawed. Let me show you what I mean. First off, there is no single thing called inflation. It's really more of an umbrella term. It's a whole collection of different ways to measure how prices are changing. And believe me, each one tells a very different story about the economy. For example, you've probably heard of the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. That tracks what an average family is paying for their groceries, gas, and rent. But then you've got wholesale inflation, which looks at what producers and importers are paying for raw materials. And you can get even more specific with numbers just for things like construction costs. They all move at different speeds. So this leads us to the most important question of all. If all these different indexes are moving at different speeds, does that mean all prices in the economy are actually rising at the same rate? The answer is a huge, emphatic no. And this right here is the big secret. This is the core insight of this whole explainer. The real story isn't about the one big inflation number you see on the news. It's about understanding how different prices change in relation to each other. Here's the absolute crucial point. Chronic inflation does not lift all boats equally. It completely warps the economic landscape. It changes the price of some things way faster than others. So your cost could be skyrocketing while the price you're able to charge for your own product barely moves. Getting a grip on these shifting relative prices, that's the whole game. Okay, so to make this easier to handle, let's split the economy into two completely different worlds. Each of these worlds plays by its own set of pricing rules. We're talking about the world of transferable goods and the world of non-transferable services. And here's the simplest way to think about it. The price for one category of stuff is basically set by the entire global market. The price for the other category? That's set by what's happening right there on your local street corner. Let's break that down a bit more. First up, we have transable goods. These are just physical products you can easily ship across borders. Think commodities like oil or coffee, or manufactured things like electronics, smartphones, cars, stuff you can put on a boat. So for these goods, the price is essentially anchored to the international market price. A seller in Brazil can't charge way more for a phone than the global price because you could just import one. And they can't charge way less because they could just export it for a better price. This means the local price is almost entirely driven by the global price, plus any local taxes, and it's super, super sensitive to any changes in the currency exchange rate. Okay, so on the complete other side of the coin, you have non-transactional services. These are things that have to be produced and consumed in the exact same place. You can't import a haircut, right? Or export your kid's third-grade classroom experience. We're talking security guards, rent, local consultants. It's all tied to one specific location. This quote just explains it perfectly. Sure, you might find an incredibly cheap haircut a few countries over, but the cost of getting there, the plane ticket, the hotel, that transaction cost makes it completely ridiculous. That service is locked into its local market. And because of this, the prices for all these non-transferable services are driven purely by local supply and demand.
So when the local economy is hot and people feel like they have more money, demand for things like restaurants, home repairs, and education goes up, and so do the prices. And by the way, wages, which is just the price of local labor, work in the exact same way.
Okay, so we've got these two different pricing worlds, one global, one local. Super interesting theory, right? But how do we actually turn this knowledge into a smarter, more accurate, and ultimately more profitable financial forecast? Well, the way forward means you have to totally abandon that idea of using one single inflation number. The solution is to get out the magnifying glass and dissect your business, line by line, right on your income statement. Let's walk through it. Say you run a company that assembles and sells laptops. First, you have to ask, what are you selling? Laptops. Okay, that's a classic transable good. Its price is tied to the world market. Now look at your costs. Your biggest expenses are probably imported computer chips. That's transable, and its cost will move with the currency exchange rate. But you also pay local salaries and rent for your factory, and those are non-transable. Their costs are going to rise with local wage inflation and the local property market. You see what's happening? For our laptop company, the price it can charge is stuck, anchored to the global market, but its local costs for labor and rent could be soaring. By breaking down every single one of your revenues and your costs into these transferable and non-transferable buckets, you can finally forecast how each line item is going to behave differently. This detailed, nitty-gritty approach is the only way to build realistic expectations and make smarter decisions in these volatile markets. So the next time you look at a forecast for an emerging market, don't just ask, what's the inflation rate? Instead, with this new lens, ask yourself, now that you can see these hidden price dynamics at play, where are the real risks? And more importantly, where are the hidden opportunities lurking in your own forecast?